Good morning guys. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this knocked out Japanese Chi-Ha tank along with the terrain and the marine figures. This was my first time building a Finemolds kit and my first time building a Japanese tank as well, so I was interested to see how it would turn out. I'll show you the build sequence. It was a fairly simple build, so there isn't much to say about it. I modelled this as a knocked out tank, but I didn't want to do a huge amount of damage to the vehicle, especially as the tracks are rubber band tracks and therefore they're quite hard to model them having been damaged or having fallen off the vehicle. So instead, once the model was built, I drilled a hole in the side to represent a shell hit from a Sherman or similar. You can see here the details on the rivets of the Type 97 are all represented nicely. And the fit is really good on these parts too, there's no need to do any gap filling. One thing I did notice is that these hatches seem to be moulded identically, which means that the handles don't line up when you put them on. You can see that there with the holes in the hatches. I think that's a mistake because according to the instructions, the handle should line up. There is a little bit of detail on the gun breech, although you won't see that unless the hatches are open. Because the interior is empty, I decided to leave the hatches slightly open, as if the crew had escaped, but not fully open so that you could see inside and see the emptiness. The only photo etch applied with the kit is these two guards over the exhausts, and they're supplied with a piece here to enable you to bend them to the correct shape. The only piece I thought was moulded quite badly was this tow cable on the rear, so I decided to leave that off and just put the empty brackets on instead. Before I glued the top and the bottom together, I painted the inside black. I know the insides of these tanks weren't black, but black just stops you peering in through the half-open hatches and seeing the fact that the tank is just a shell. I painted the tank using the standard Japanese 3-colour camo, but I was very aware that if I did this wrong it would look very much like a standard German 3-colour camo scheme. So for the yellowy colour I used khaki, and for the brown, instead of using NATO brown directly, I mixed in a little bit of XF9 hull red, and I think that makes it stand out enough from a standard German pattern. And to make it stand out more, I painted the yellow stripe which some Japanese tanks had. And to mask for that, I used blue tack sausages across the hull. There are very few decals on any Japanese tank. I went for the version that has this nice kind of lightning strike on the side. And once that was done, I did some detail painting of the tools and the wheels. Rather than painting all the tools, I decided that they would have been painted at the factory with the camo, and I just painted the edges to suggest that some of that paint had worn away. To give some variation in tone, I went over the edges of the tank with a lighter version of each of the camo colours. So here for the dark red brown colour I used NATO brown. And to give a bit of a worn effect I also used the same technique but using a sponge. And by doing that over the decals like here, it just makes them appear a little bit more like they're part of the tank. The rubber tracks supplied in this kit are pretty horrendous, and I did have a lot of problems trying to get them to stick. Luckily in the end I was able to hide the join at the bottom and then just put it into the terrain which I built at the end. I used a dark brown oil paint thinned with enamel thinners to make the rivets and the other details stand out. And once I started to apply that wash, I thought actually it might look better all over the tank, so I kind of slopped it over everything to get some sort of streaks of dirt and things like that all over the tank. For the weathering I mainly wanted some dust effects. I tried these on my M3 Lee Australian version a while ago and the results were okay, but I needed a bit more practice. For the Chi-Ha here I decided to use buff oil paint, and I applied the paint to the surface and then blended it in with a dry brush. No thinner of any sort used here. And my technique was to start by putting the paint in the crevices and around the detail and then working it out towards the centre of the panels as I blended it. Around the turret ring I applied a little bit of dark oil paint as well, but the predominant colour I was using here was buff. For the terrain base I used this small piece of wood and this desert sand acrylic paste from AK Interactive. There's not much of this left, but if I water it down a little bit with some water it will be enough to cover this base. I wanted to make sure that I added a nice texture to the ground as well, so in the process of making the terrain I decided to use some of this woodland scenic grass and some ballast as well, and some of this moss like stuff. I'm not really sure what this is called. I got this at a local art and craft shop. It makes good looking tree roots and similar. So I put the paste in a container, mixed it with some water, threw in some stones, threw in those moss tree root things, I'm not sure what they're called, gave it a good stir. I added a bit of very fine sand as well, and basically just kept stirring it and mixing until I got what I wanted. I cut the grass into fine pieces. And then when I had something which I thought was reasonable, I just whacked it onto the piece of wood. The look that I'm going for here is sort of beach at the edge of the jungle, not sort of shoreline beach. So I'm going to have some grass here, sort of tree roots and things like that mixed into the terrain. So I just sprinkled on some 12mm static grass. And a few more stones. At this stage I'm going for texture, not colour, so all of this will be painted over, so it doesn't matter that it looks that strange yellow colour at the moment. And I took some of the same grass which I cut into the mixture earlier and squeezed it together to make some bunches of grass. Not forgetting, of course, we need some tank tracks, and they need to be fairly deep because this is quite soft ground. And to paint the terrain I used 4 colours: flat earth, desert yellow, dark yellow and buff. I started by painting the flat earth on top, not too widely, mainly in areas I thought should be a little bit darker. Then I tried to lighten it with some desert yellow, and then lighten things a bit more with the buff. And really this was a case of just mixing and matching the paints, trying to get a variety of colour tones, and not having just any one colour be dominant in any particular area. Finally I decided I wanted a bit more grass, so I used some watered down PVA, and again just got some static grass. This is the 12mm stuff, scrunched it together in my hands and threw it on top of the PVA. Once the terrain was finished, I used the same acrylic terrain mixture on the tracks of the tank, and I used that to fix the tank to the base as well. And then finally, because of the bright yellow colour of the acrylic paste, I had to put a very thin layer of the previous paint colour, so the flat earth in particular, over the tracks to make them blend in. For the figures I used this set of US Marines with dogs from Master Box, and you can see the box art shows them in a variety of uniforms. I decided to paint them in the beach camo, which you can see on the left there, with one of them in the green overalls that you can see in the centre. Master Box lists the paints using Vallejo numbers, which I don't have, so I went for a buff base colour. I thought XF65 Field Grey was a good match for the green overalls. I'm not going to show you every step that I took to paint these figures because I'm not a figure expert by any means, but here are the figures with a coat of buff XF57 and then the initial camo spots put in flat earth. And here they are with some more spots in khaki. And then the final spots were done in desert yellow. And once the details were painted, I was able to put everything together, and here is the final result. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, guys. I really enjoyed making this kit. I feel like the dust weathering effects are a big improvement on the last time I tried them, and I'm really happy with the figures as well. The dogs were a little bit more challenging and I need to work on those a bit, but overall I'm happy with the end result. So once again, thank you for watching. If you liked this video, I'm sure you know where the subscribe, the like and the share buttons are, and I hope to see you next time.